Socrates was not at all convinced by the position of the sophists, and Plato even less so. They thought there was just something basically wrong with the position the sophists were taking. They thought that there should be an absolute truth, absolute values in ethics, absolute truth in ethics. And they went about showing, at least Plato in the dialogue Protagoras goes about showing there's a problem with this whole idea of relative truth. Namely, he points out that, or tries to argue, that position that Protagoras takes. In the dialogue, the Theaetetus, he discusses Protagoras' position. He says it's self-contradictory. And we will take a look at the argument that purports to show, that's supposed to show, that his position is self-contradictory. But even more important, I'm not sure that that was such a strong argument, but it will help us understand what's being asserted, what's being claimed when they say that truth is relative. But there's a bigger problem, and the bigger problem is, if truth is relative, you can't account for why the advice of an expert is better than the advice of somebody with no expertise. For example, if you're trying to raise a dairy cow, and you come to me, the cow isn't giving enough milk. Presumably you're going to get pretty bad advice. I don't know anything about dairy cows, but if you went to a farmer, you should be getting some good advice. But if if truth is relative, my advice should be as good as the farmer's advice. So that seems to be a problem. And there are problems when looking at relativism with respect to political philosophy. Societies or the government's rules sometimes seem to be unnatural, or have been. That is, you take away power from the experts, the people who know how to govern, and you give the power to people who don't have knowledge of how to do it. And in general, there is a big issue, and a big issue that comes out in Plato's Crito. And it's a counterexample to the whole idea that ethical values are relative. And I should back up and tell you, or I should mention, that Crito is a dialogue that takes place after Socrates' trial. For you who don't know what happened, have never heard about the apology, the trial of Socrates. Socrates was put on trial by a group supporting a few sophists on some trumped-up charges. And Socrates went and defended himself at the trial. He was convicted by a small margin and sentenced to death. His crimes? Well, the true crimes were that he got the people in power very angry at him, that he used to ask them embarrassing questions that they couldn't answer, and show that while they claimed to know things, they did in fact not know. They did in fact know. Let me back up. They did not know the stuff that they claimed that they did know. They really knew nothing. Now, as a result of that, they came up with these trumped-up charges that Socrates had been corrupting the youth, which is kind of understandable that they came up with that, because they were a bunch of the children of the rich and famous, the jet setters, the guys driving around in the ancient Greek equivalents of the Ferraris, flying around in jets, hanging out with Socrates, and rather than going to a foreign capital to party in some nightclub, what these guys used to do was hang out with Socrates. And so Socrates was convicted of corrupting the youth. In addition to which, he was convicted of blasphemy, going against the gods. But in the Crito, so he gets convicted, and the sentence is death. And the dialogue Crito is about his friend Critos coming to see him a few days before he's to be executed, and pleading with him that they're able to bribe the people. They found a place for him to say they're going to take him out of Athens, and they're going to take him away. But Socrates insists that he cannot do that because it would be wrong for him to escape punishment, because he would be breaking a promise that was his social contract. So for him, he puts his life on the line because there are absolute ethical values, and he is not about to compromise those absolute ethical values, even if he is going to be executed for very bad reasons, for wrong reasons.